My friends, will you pray with me? Gracious and loving God, open my heart and my mind that I may be a conduit for your message today. My God, my strength, and my Redeemer. Amen.
Amen.
So, they came together in Jerusalem. They came from all the known world. So, presumably, nobody came from Milwaukee. All the known world. Most of them were Jews. But they could not understand each other. They spoke the languages of the countries where they had migrated. And they came together here in Jerusalem. They came back. They went home to celebrate. And they gathered in the square. And Peter spoke to them. And they, every one of them, understood what he said. They understood in their own languages. For us, it's kind of like the Star Trek, as if the Star Trek Universal Translator was in operation.
Yes.
They spoke and they were understood. They listened and they knew what was said. And we see this as a miracle. We see it as a miracle because all of the people spoke different languages. You know, today, we often have the problem of misunderstanding. Even though, at least theoretically, we all speak the same language. You know, we all speak English here, right?
No.
Not. And yet, we have trouble understanding someone from Britain or Mississippi or Australia or Maine. Dialects and accents make it difficult for us to really interpret what someone means. And most of us here will have difficulty understanding someone who speaks American Sign Language. We certainly have difficulty when someone speaks Spanish or Chinese or any one of the myriad of spoken languages in the world. You know what though? We even have trouble when we're talking to someone from the same part of the world as we are. Someone who speaks the same language that we do. Because we come from different places, even though we may come from the same physical location. We've all been raised in different families. We have different experiences. You know, experiences in the world, in school, in employment. Most of us here know that we experience the world differently as GLBTQ people. We experience it differently if we are people of color. We experience it differently if we were raised in poverty. We experience it differently even though we were all raised in the same country. And in fact, we experience it differently if we were raised in the country rather than the city. And because of our differences, we have trouble understanding each other. And so the fact that all of the people in that crowd understood what Peter was saying, excuse me, is more of a miracle. It's more of a miracle than just the universal translator. Because they understood, not just the words, they understood what he meant. Now, the question is, how do we deal with our lack of understanding of other people? And how do we deal with others who do not seem to understand us? You know, the answer is one of those things that's really simple to define. but very difficult to implement. Because, and I know you're going to push back here, okay? Because we need to communicate with each other. We need to speak to each other. We maybe need to sign to each other. We need to communicate with each other. And more than that, we need to share with each other who we are. And we need to find out who the person next to us is. And I don't mean just reading somebody's name tag. Speaking's not enough. We have to actively listen. We have to listen to make sure that we understand. And we need to do this whether we speak English or Spanish or North or South, gay or straight, verbal or sign. We need to ask other people, sometimes, to repeat, to make sure that what we heard is what they meant. Happens in my house all the time. Honey, did you mean? No! Right? You just have to ask sometimes. But even more is required. We need to find out who that person is. We need to try to understand where they come from. You know, we can never really understand what it means to be an immigrant if we were born here. We can never really understand what it's like to be born of a different race or a different ethnicity. We can never really understand what it means to be deaf or blind or differently abled, or if you are deaf or blind or differently abled, to understand what it means to be hearing or sighted or able to walk. All we can do is communicate, or try to communicate. All we can do is work to each of us individually broaden our views of other people. All we can do is be active listeners. And that means all we can do is try. Okay? That's what my mother used to say, right? Well, just try. That's my mother. Well, just try. And not just once. And not just once. So, in order to make that happen, we have to spend time together. We have to spend time together. You know, Jesus often used stories about the rural life and pictures, pastoral pictures of the world to explain to his disciples. The idea of sheep who follow and flock together is a very common trope. We think of sheep. When we think of sheep, we sometimes think of, blind, unthinking creatures. But you know what? We need to expand that definition. We need to think of sheep. If we think of ourselves as Jesus' sheep, then we need to think about sheep as those who gather together for mutual protection. We need to think of sheep, we need to be sheep who know our shepherd and know that the shepherd has defined our direction. We need to flock together. And perhaps we need to change ourselves. You know, we need to let God change us so that we can work together to become a better flock. You know, we can become a flock that negotiates our direction. Well, we all think we should go this way. Maybe we need to negotiate with this one over here to follow, so we can move together. We need to become a flock that works to find out what God, the shepherd, wants of us, and a flock that does that thing. So, in order to become a flock, we need to communicate. We need to let the Spirit of God, that flame that came down on the crowd at Pentecost, that flame, fill us up. Fill us up. We need to let it connect us, much like we had the yarn connecting us. And then we can become a movement that can change the world. Amen?
Amen.